Colin, good morning. What's up? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Carlos. I'm doing well here in Austin.
We're excited to have you on the show today. We wanted to talk marketplaces. Our audience is a lot of fintech lenders that source deals through like the Credit Karmas, the Experience, the Nerd Wallets of the world. So they deal with marketplaces every single day, and I love kind of bringing insight on folks like on the frontier of what's happening in marketplaces. You're one of the folks I consider to be on that frontier. And you wrote a piece in your Substack in January titled AI and Marketplaces, the Future is Agent-Led Marketplaces. Can you give us a summary of some of the big ideas there?
Yeah, I think try to keep it fairly like high level. It, at a basic level, we've had AI innovation, right? The springing up everywhere. We've seen all kinds of creative destruction happening, and a lot of it's leading to, what I would call efficiency gains for people. They can do things that traditionally were fairly manual or fairly labor intensive pretty quickly now, whether it's creating content, analysis, the voice dictation. There's just like a whole litany of things that you can do, which are amazing and really improve my productivity. But I kind of view those as horizontally impacting every business. But for marketplaces specifically, I think what gets really interesting is how agentic AI can actually put marketplaces into more of a like proactive position. So traditionally, let's say it's like a normal kind of demand side pick model. The supplier, maybe in this case, credit card company, you put up your credit cards as ads essentially in the marketplace. Then the demand side comes whenever they want, whether it's late at night, early in the morning, looks, filters, sorts, winnows it down, and eventually picks something, hopefully. What I think is going to happen is that core matching piece of a marketplace is actually going to get subsumed by AI, and that AI is actually going to be doing a much better job because this is what it's great at: taking huge amounts of data, synthesizing it, and recommending things, and giving recommendations, and essentially switching marketplaces from this demand side or supply side pick model into marketplace pick models, where the marketplace actually does the heavy lifting and may even proactively be able to suggest things for you based on what it know you may need. And I think that's not going to happen tomorrow by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that's what's coming. And we can already see this happening with people switching from Google over into LLM search, basically, whether it's, ChatGPT search, Perplexity, Claude now has search as well, and actually doing their searches there. And your interactions with your LLM actually they improve over time. They get to know you, like they can tailor
Mm-hmm.
results. So you can ask it to tailor. And so I think those things are already starting to prove out that people want to have those one-to-one personal conversations. And I think marketplaces have an opportunity to really take advantage of that.
Okay. So if I think one of the things you said was the proactive recommendation, do you see in a context like that where it's not even just a recommendation, it's hey AI, I need a mortgage for $300,000. Go do it. I don't like don't even check in with me. Just find the best rate, wire me the money or wire it to my whatever, wherever it's going to make the transaction.
I mean, it's all. I think the key with all these things is that you don't want to build one size fits all solutions. You want to build solutions that allow people to feel in control, but do the heavy lifting for them. I think that's a really important piece of adoption, is that people don't feel like they're cut out and a mistake can be made, right? They want to be involved more in a supervisory
Hmm.
role. I think operator, ChatGPT is like a kind of web agent, does a nice job of this, where if you ask it to do something and it gets to a point where it, probably has a decision that may have consequences, it asks you to take over or asks you what it should do. And I think that's the right way to handle it, at least in a very basic sense. And so I think with the mortgage, there's probably someone buying a house, and the whole process of getting pre-approved and finding the right one, like you're right, it's inefficient. It's usually local, like who's your realtor recommending, like, and realistically that doesn't matter that much, like if you could actually search across everything and find the best rate. um And so I do think there is a very like if you can give something a task and an objective, I think that's really well suited for AI. Like you said, I want to buy a house at this price. These are my parameters, like my income, all of this. Go find me the best mortgage.
Mhm.
And I want to optimize for the lowest amount down. Or, I want to do normal 20% down. Um, and I actually think even on the proactive side, this is probably even a better place to start is people with a house and a mortgage, go help them. Or even a auto loan,
Mm.
whatever it is. It's like, everyone tries to do this currently, like recommendations, but I find them to actually be terrible. I think I get some from Credit Karma around my car. It's like you could refinance now and save money. And every time I look at it, I'm like, I would never save money on this. Like I don't this is just not true. And so I feel like there's a low bar that AI can really disrupt some of these like very basic recommendation patterns. And that's kind of like again at my core of like why I think marketplaces are going to be really changed by AI is because um, before AI is very hard to recommend things in a really
Mhm.
meaningful way that people felt useful. So
Yeah. I mean, let me add a layer to that in lending, which may it doesn't apply to a lot of the marketplaces, and you mentioned a few examples in your article. But one of the things I always think about in lending is there's a filter on eligibility for every single product out there. And so that's number one. Like if there's 100 cards on NerdWallet, I'm not going to get approved for 100 of them if I apply. And that's me with like an 800 FICO score. I can guarantee you some of those banks will decline me for a number of reasons. They may think I have too many credit cards. They may think I have too much outstanding debt, whatever. There's a number of things they might be able to say there. So you have the eligibility issue. And then the other problem is you have pricing. Pricing is also person level based on your risk. So the marketplace needs to know you as a consumer in an extraordinary amount of detail to actually be able to recommend something. So I think the game in financial services is way harder because it's almost like a one-to-one match on the user and the eligibility and the pricing. So like do you see that same dynamic in other
yeah,
contexts?
I don't think it's unique. I think as we all know, like the better we can capture preferences of people or life situation, the better we can recommend anything, right? Like what I mean, think of travel. I always think because I spent a lot of time in that. My travel pattern is way different now that I have 3 kids than it was when I had 0 kids, right? Like, and I just think that every website is an approximation of the average, right? Like what increases conversion rate on the average, right? And what we know increasingly, or we should know intuitively too, is that like specialization matters. And I think the hard part about specialization is it creates smaller and smaller TAMs, right? Like it's like I think that's what, from a business perspective why it's less attractive. But we know that well, if you can actually have a horizontal business that can personalize better, you can actually have higher conversion rates within these very specific use cases rather than building to the average. I think that's what the internet 2.0 era is like we've built to a bunch of averages across websites and we now have the opportunity to have personalized one-on-one communications. And I think that's why again the LLMs are so powerful is that people actually want to talk to someone or something and feel heard and feel understood. And I think that's what's happening. And so to your point, like I actually think there's a huge advantage going towards this for credit card and like insurance underwriting, finance underwriting, like
Mhm.
whatever it is, because LLMs can really understand structured data and instructions really well, and can contextualize that. And I kind of think of like credit cards, like some of the credit cards I get now are less about the financial reward and more about like what they offer. So, for example, I'm from Alaska. We go back to Alaska every year, so I get the Alaska credit card because you get a companion fare, and my
Mhm.
wife gets one. We get 2 companion fares, and now we're basically not paying for a plane ticket to 2 plane tickets. And so I think those things are actually really important context of why people buy that card, um, for example. And so they know that, but if you go on Credit Karma, I don't think they really understand that from a user perspective of why that card is going to win. Like if someone searched best airline card, you start to get some idea that they care about airlines, but they're not really getting at the use case of why they want it. Um, Like, for example, I
Yes.
imagine
Yeah.
Alaska Airlines credit card does really well on the West Coast for people that do some large flight frequent, yearly.
But they would have to see. I'm trying to see if I put myself in Credit Karma's shoes, what data asset they would have to know in order to connect the dots. For you, maybe it's your transaction history over the years. They'll see, hey, there's a flight out from Austin to Alaska that might actually show up in a credit card statement somewhere. And now they
Yeah.
know that's a thing for you. And now, theoretically, that could bubble up through an LLM and make a recommendation.
Yeah, I think in the current
Yeah.
format of how all of these websites have been built and products, it's too expensive to do that. And I think the next generation of, like iteration of websites and with AI involved, that will not be as expensive to do. And therefore it will be more tailored.
Okay. That connects to a a concept you hit in your article. You called it the AI spectrum. There's 5 levels to it. There's AI enhanced, AI product extension, all the way over to on the right side, AI first. Can you talk us through that framework a little bit and maybe put it in like a real life context? For example,
Yeah.
like where do you think NerdWallet is on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think so that's from the great folks at NFX, who I greatly admire. They're thinking all these things. The spectrum, if you look at like new businesses have the advantage of being able to go far right on the spectrum really quickly, right? Like I can choose to be AI first, right? Or AI native, whatever you want to call it. Versus a legacy business, it's a very different problem. And by legacy, I mean really anything before the advent of AI. Like it, and so basically what you are thinking about is how do I find and replace things in my business and add AI. But inherently,
Mhm.
I'm not going to have built first principles from an AI perspective. So that's inherent disadvantage of like the longer term. I think in the nearer term, there's huge efficiency gains for adopting AI, right? And so that's where I think in the nearer term, the incumbents will actually get huge profit advantages from these things. But in the longer term, they're at a structural disadvantage because it's so hard to refactor what you've already built and reintegrate. And I could be wrong on that, but I think that's always the problem, is that and with the speed of um, development now because of AI, I think you're increasingly going to see that like legacy business have a harder time keeping up unless
Mhm.
they can really adapt to that. So with Credit Karma, for example, I kind of put them in the bucket, and I don't have any insight into this. I know some great people that work there, but I imagine that they are looking at ways to integrate AI and use it, and they'll probably, but it's gonna be more in like discrete product format, and it's not going to be probably the core of their search or of how they build and think about the business because they've been building and thinking about this business for the last decade in a different way, and so it's just the DNA is just different. So I think the big winners and the interesting moves are going to be the people that can change their DNA in the coming years.
Got it. I want to get your take on continuing on the theme here, like financial marketplaces.
Hmm.
I wrote a little piece here on LinkedIn. What you would add, what you agree with, disagree with. So the basic take was AI is about to wreck affiliate marketing. For years, it worked the same way. Consumer search for financial products. Sites like NerdWallet and Bank, right, listed them. Lenders paid to be featured. That's about to break. Why? Trust is shifting. People are losing confidence in traditional media. They trust creators. They follow people like Vivian Tu and Humphrey Yang. They do not just watch; they believe, and belief converts. Decision making's changing. Today, people compare and research options. Soon, they will not. They will tell an AI what they need, and it will just do it. Find me a no fee card with 2% cash back and a 10K line from one of these 3 brands that I trust. Just get the best one and ship it to my iPhone. No search, no review sites, just action. Most affiliate marketers are still optimizing for views and clicks, but the game is shifting to AI enabled transactions. Does that future sound like it's plausible?
Yeah, I think it's already happening. Like I don't like the thing about the future is that it's in the in on the horizon, not in the moment. And I actually think it's already happened. I think if we like jump up from like a meta level,
Yeah.
um, Google is having an existential risk of, and that they're introducing to themselves with AI being involved in search now, and not in the sense that like on the behind the scenes AI being used, because there's been some form of that for a long period of time. But we're really talking about now is like AI results at the top of search, dramatically cannibalizing everything below it, and that's already happening. I've seen it across many businesses. It's this a dramatic softening of queries specifically around things like you said, like very specific recommendation type queries.
Uh-huh.
That is perfect for something that is really good at taking huge amounts of data, consolidating it into very specific recommendations, which LLMs are good at doing. And so that's happening today. So it's not the future, it's now. I think
Got it.
that's at the meta level. I think
Uh,
the granular specifics, the how, the what, and how exactly it shakes out, I think it'll be hard to tell. But I do think the paradigm of going to a website, click a button, link me over to another site, and getting to purchase something and getting credit for it started fraying a long time ago, specifically in the mobile era with apps. Right? We just saw it, like Apple's privacy update dramatically impacted conversion tracking for affiliates. Everything went server side. You know, there's still going to be some world where all of that works, but I do think it's going to be decided by the LLMs and how they want to handle linking out and how they do that. Because right now, from my understanding, they're not picking up affiliate links and putting it in there. They're going
yeah.
probably straight to the source. And so I think there's going to be a hard reality for some of these marketplaces that are more aggregator esque, um, that Google is going to revert and as our LLMs to
Mhm.
authority, and going to like go to source material. And so I think brands specifically that have high authority are actually going to really benefit from this. Uh, so I think a lot of it's going to get replaced, like you said, like these recommendation type affiliates, and even the bigger marketplaces are really going to feel the pain because a lot of these recommendation searches are going to go straight in the LLMs.
Interesting. I want to pause here for a second to tell you about one of our sponsors, Spinwheel. They've built an API that streamlines your lending application form with just 2 fields. When a customer shares just their birth date and phone number, they can go grab all the information needed to pre-fill their application form. So regardless of what channel you play in, you know that the higher the application rate goes, the lower your cost of acquisition becomes, and the more media you can buy to generate growth. Additionally, they can give you real-time verified consumer credit data and seamless payment processing, which can help you serve customers beyond the initial application. To see a demo, go to spinwheel.io or check out the link in the show notes. It'll hook you up straight with their head of growth. Before the show, you were, I think, in ChatGPT playing around with credit card query.
Yeah.
What struck me about what you found, I think you said, "Hey, I'm looking for a card that looks like XYZ," and it spit out big brand names, Citibank, Chase, etc. I tend to work with a lot of the up and comers, the fintechs that don't have recognizable brands. Certainly, none of them appeared in your search query. The nice thing about a platform like a Credit Karma or a NerdWallet is that they end up being discovery platforms for these niche fintech products that don't have the budgets to be doing mass media and to like really build their brands. I worry that the discovery there is going to be curtailed to some degree when the LLMs are leaning to like the authority, quote unquote, the cities, the chases, etc. If you were a small fintech brand that played in a niche, how would you optimize distribution out of an LLM like ChatGPT?
Yeah. I think and I will say that I think these are theories and maybe some conjecture. But the things that I would be testing to verify would be the following. I think one area of interest is that OpenAI specifically, heavy investment from Microsoft and reportedly uses Bing as their search. So I think optimizing for Bing potentially has some upside there that needs to be tested. I'm currently looking into that myself and trying to understand what happens there. But I think that's one bet to take. I think another way to think about this is if you know LLMs are going to look at things from an authority perspective, how can you get authority, maybe whether it's websites or people to talk about you? And so I think there'll be increasing kind of push towards authoritative sources, whether it's, someone like you maybe on the fintech side of things, like your, your content around these topics is probably going to be authoritative. And so if you can talk about these people, they're going to get picked up. And so I think increasingly people with audiences and expertise are going to actually have real advantages. I've already seen this in my writing. I wouldn't say a huge percentage
Mm.
of my signups for my newsletter come from LLMs, but it's a couple percentage.
Mm.
And I see it. And I started looking at the searches myself, and I'm showing up for very specific marketplace questions, like someone actually looking for, how do I do this with a marketplace? And those are the things I want to show up for. Do I show up for what's the best newsletter? No. But do I show up for what, like what are the best sources for marketplaces? Those are the types of searches where I want to be optimizing and showing up for. And so how do you
Interesting.
go out and build those is you get really people, authoritative sources to say you are an authority on this as well.
Interesting. Well, it's the authoritative sources, but it's also putting out content. And I can't tell you the
Hmm.
number of fintechs I talk to and work with that are basically arbitraging media, Meta, affiliates, direct mail. Like they're just playing the spread on what it costs to buy the media and what the conversion rate, all that. Like it's the performance marketer stuff. And I don't often see a brand strategy, a content strategy, you know, nothing that comes close to what you're describing. So, am I thinking about that right? If I'm an
Yeah.
ARB only shop, like should I be worried I'm gonna get disrupted in my distribution?
I think everything's up for grabs right now, and nothing is a sacred cow. I think I saw, I don't remember who it was, but on LinkedIn, I was like, someone was like, what we know, all of the marketing tactics of the last decade that we've all been optimizing for are not working nearly as well as they used to. Job posting for VP of marketing, 10 plus years of experience in the things that aren't working anymore. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because I think it's right. I think that the playbook, it has to be rewritten right now. And I think that's caused a lot of uncertainty. And so I don't think I have the answers on what that is. And I actually think people should be excited that the door has opened for dramatically new distribution and shouldn't be thinking about things in the way that they were. And I think that's a retraining and rewiring that's really hard to do. Um, I think one area for people producing content that's very clear to me, and I've seen this through different companies I invested in and work with, is companies that have really structured data that's unique and high quality are showing up in the AI overlays in Google. Just it's working. They're showing up. Are they getting those people to click to their website? Not necessarily, but they are showing. And like that's literally the best thing you can get right now. Um,
Can
and
you give me an
so
example of that? Like what does that look like in practice?
yeah, I so like company on the board of Land Trust, they're like Airbnb for hunting on land, really recreation. They've built out data sets around GMUs, game management units, hunting seasons, and things that are available on state websites and things like that,
Got it.
but not really aggregated in one spot for a given species or state. And so they have that structured data. Google loves it. LLMs love it, right? Because
Mm.
someone goes searches, what are the turkey seasons in, North Carolina? They're going to be showing up as an authoritative result. And so I think that's a good example where brands can start to own some of these things a bit more and be the resource. And so that's what I would be thinking about is how do you feed the LLMs rather than how do you rank in the LLMs? I think ranking is like in some sense a bit of a paradigm shift that we're all used to with Google is like how do we get number one result?
Yeah.
Now it's like, well, actually, the LLM's going to synthesize the information and give you an answer. So how do I get to be in that answer as an authoritative source?
Interesting.
So I think that's
Did
the mind shift.
yeah. Yeah. So in the example you gave, it seems like they have kind of first party data that they're aggregating together and publishing. Do you think curation plays are also part of this? Like I'm thinking my newsletter, I curate news in a very tight niche and I add like my editorial to that, but I publish weekly and it's within like a specific container. But if you search the internet long enough, I think you could find all the things. It's the curation that is my value add in that context. Like do you so I guess I'm asking
Yeah.
on curation,
Well,
is that a way to stand out in an
yeah,
LLM world?
I think the way to think about this, I don't think any of us remember. I mean, like some of us remember, but like we don't really remember materially what life was like before the internet for demand aggregation. And I actually think demand aggregation before the internet was really, really difficult. Like you had to have distribution channels through like mail, the phone book, door to door sales, right? Like there was a very like one to one kind of approach to it. And the internet made it easier to aggregate people because there's a digital persona and footprint of those people. And so I think what's happening again is we're seeing the unbundling of the bundling of the internet, right? Through LMs where everyone's having a one-to-one relationship with what they're using. But that means it's becoming increasingly hard because people aren't aggregating in any one spot. And the gatekeepers of the places that are having people bundle, aggregated have really increased the price to play. And
Okay.
so I think what you're getting at, the question is like what value add, what am I doing? Building an audience is going to be one of the most important things for any person, brand, company, whatever you are to survive. Right. And increasingly people then are going to want access to your very specific audience because of its value. Right. Like I can imagine, for this podcast, you bring together all of these fintech leaders in lending. That's eventually going to be very useful to people and valuable. And
Hmm.
so I think that's increasingly what we're going to see. Is like maybe you want to call it this like a tribalization of of groups.
Is that because of the trust factor that creator has with their audience? Is it because of the community that and like the networking that happens underneath it? Like what are some of the underlying reasons that you think that that's true?
Yeah, I'd say I got a lot of inspiration from your free toaster newsletter and started doing the same thing in the marketplaces.
Yeah,
I'm giving
you're
you full
crushing it and you're
full
new. Yeah.
credit, full credit. But I
You've
saw
way
what you were
exceeded
doing.
us on growth. So
Yeah,
congrats, man. Yeah.
I saw what you did,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was a light bulb for me that I was like, man, I wish I had this aggregation of really important information in one spot, right? Around a topic that I am like interested in that not that many other people are interested in the scheme of things, right? But there's a diehard group of people that are very interested in it. And I was like, you know what? I want to be in front of those people every week and top of mind for them. And so I think that's the important way to think about this is like, you're going to have to add value in some way that's outside of what everything else is doing. The best part of every time I go to Perplexity or ChatGPT and try to do what I'm doing, it doesn't do a very good job of it. And I'm like, yes,
You
like
giggle.
this is great, and Google does a terrible, if you like
Yeah.
search
Yeah.
marketplace
Yeah.
news,
Yeah.
it's not specific enough. Like I don't know how to make it specific enough with my search online marketplaces, but
Hmm.
then you do that, mostly news about Amazon. Like like you have to highly curate and know the niche. And I think
Yeah.
that is what's really valuable and where you gain an audience is you can build that kind of information set that people can't get anywhere else and you kind of aggregate that niche. And so I think that's what I'm saying is like we're unbundling from this like broader sense and to rebundle in these more niche sets, which then will be understood by the LLMs by the content you're creating. And
Got it.
like that's where you're going to get the recommendation. So that's kind of like where I see it all
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Uh
No, that I mean that all resonates to me as a B2B creator, as someone that runs a service business for banks. Like without content, my distribution is completely different. I don't know. I actually don't know what I would do if it wasn't for the newsletter, for this show, for my LinkedIn post. I don't know how I would network and meet the people that end up
Well,
hiring me.
totally. And
Yeah.
I think people don't talk about this a lot, but Twitter used to be an amazing X now used to be an amazing channel for me and for other people. And honestly, it's just dried up. I don't. It's not even like I am on it only because of the relationships I have on it, like people that I interested in talking to essentially are on it. But I'd say the actual distribution for the average creator on it is probably gone closer to zero.
Oh, it's zero.
And
It's exactly zero for me.
yeah,
I've stopped.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and probably even the people you want to talk to are not on there,
Yeah.
in a very meaningful way. And so that was a wake up call for me that, I need to actually like aggregate audience in a way that I can control it. And I don't think that's a new concept, but I think it's becoming increasingly important. And like you see businesses like Beehive proliferating and Substack because of this, right? And they've enabled it, which also makes it easier. But I do think there's increasingly hard to find your audience. Um, and the only way you're going to actually access them is by trying to aggregate them over time.
This is a quick plug here for my marketing agency. It's called New Market Growth. We do nothing but help fintech lenders accelerate their growth in affiliate marketing channels. Our services are both strategic and operational. And if you want to learn more about how we can help you, find us at newmarketgrowth.com or email me directly at carlos@newmarketgrowth.com.
I want to take the concept you teed up earlier around building audience in a B2B creator context, my context, your world. It makes total sense. It's actually, I know exactly how that playbook works, but let's put it in a B2C context here for a second. And I'll just give you like a specific example of a product I learned about recently. And you maybe pull it up on Google if you want. It's called Yendo, Yendo. And they're a credit card that serves folks with lower credit limits or with lower credit scores. So these
Huh.
are folks that often get declined for credit. Um, but the innovation here is they're able to connect the equity you have in your car to the credit line they can serve on your card. And these are people that usually either get declined or have like a $300 credit limit, like a very, very tight spending band. And they're able to approve these folks for like thousands of dollars, right? So if you were Yendo, what audience would you be building? How would you build it? Like, I don't even know where I would start if faced with that problem, but I'm curious your take there.
Yeah, no, first off, it's fascinating to like figure out how to collateralize, right? I think it's very interesting to create that liquidity, right? By figuring out like clever ways of collateralizing these loans, essentially, or the credit. So if I was them, I think still a very strong path in all of this. And like, I know this doesn't answer the question about building an audience, but like figuring out who's doing what you're doing already and enabling them um, with this product is, I think, really important. So partnerships and kind of like native distribution through however people are doing this is going to be really like an important strategy. I think partnerships are going to increasingly be important because of access to audience. But for me, like I would look at this audience and think from a first principles perspective, like what do they like? What do they do? And where do they live, so to speak? Not in like physicality where they live, but like where they live with their time. And I would try and architect around that. So I'll give you like an example of one of my portfolio companies, a company called Autopilot. One of the things they identified is that with basically with the passing of the baby boomer generation, there's going to be this huge transfer of wealth. And most people don't want to use the financial advisor from their parent. And they may not even necessarily want to use a financial advisor. They may want to do it themselves. And so that's an interesting concept, right? Most of those people are going to be in their late 30s to early 50s right now. And what did they grow up doing? Where do they live? And it turns out the majority of us are denizens of the internet. We grew up as the probably the 2.0 internet era generation. And what do we love? Memes, internet culture, things like that. And so they built their whole business around finding people that want to like do self-custodied and management of their own funds by creating things around memes. And so that's copy trading, Nancy Pelosi, uh, doing the inverse Jim Cramer, like all the things that we find funny and understand because we lived it. That's what they're owning, right? And that's the kind of, and so I think that's a really important insight is your audience doesn't have to be one to one. They like XYZ thing, like they like golf. I'm going to do a golf sponsorship. That's not what I'm saying. I think you kind of need to deeply understand that audience and understand how to essentially entertain them and relate with them. I think Robinhood does a nice job with its newsletter snacks, of sending me really interesting information and news that I find valuable. And it keeps them top of mind. And then I'm like, oh, I should go trade a stock. I should check my portfolio, things like that. So I think there are many ways to do it. But I think it comes from a deep audience understanding of like, what do people that do this thing really value and where do they spend their time and energy so I can be kind of where their eyeballs are. Like if I was doing a product around teenagers today, I 100% would be pretty much forsaking Google search and figuring out how to optimize for TikTok search. I think there's a generational shift around search from text-based search to video-based search. And I think you got to know your audience. So this Yendo, people that are like moving into buying cars are going to be the teenagers. Those are the, like in my mind, are like the young, my early 20s people that don't have enough assets and other credit history to get the credit card they want, but they can back it with probably their first car, things like that. And so I think because of that, they probably need to lean heavily into video-based search on social platforms and building audiences around the things those people resonate with.
Got
I
it.
don't know, their skibbity toilet or whatever it might
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
like things that I know about because of my kids, but not because I actually relate or understood it or lived the meme.
Yeah. No, and to me that the content pillars there, and I agree it's probably short form video, it's YouTube, it's TikTok, it's that because that's probably where that demo lives online. But I doubt the content strategy is talk about credit cards. You probably rarely
No.
talk about credit cards. It's about how to like make good personal finance decisions and like what's the technology out there and it's budgeting. It's like educational but funny, entertaining. And then now and then you're like, hey, by the way, there's this Yendo card, right? And you're kind of hitting it in really select moments. That's how I would imagine that comes to life. And maybe you have a
Yeah.
spokesperson that's popular or already an influencer in the category, right? That can ride along with the brand.
Let me give you an example of a
Yeah.
interesting, not in finance, but just more of a parable. There's a company called Doc Tours, um, and they're a marketplace around travel procedures, like traveling to get a procedure, whether it's like hair replacement or something like
I'm
that.
seeing a lot of those lately.
Yeah, yeah. So they kind of, I don't know if they pioneered it, but they were like one of the first people to get influencers to film doing like hair replacement surgery travel, and people love watching it, right? And so there's a whole genre now of people filming videos of themselves going to Turkey or wherever it is and getting hair replacement and the recovery. And so I think those are really important insights that like, that really jumpstart their business, and gave them a lot of volume. And so I think if you can find and create your own new format, man, like do it. Like that's why I was saying earlier, like I think we have the opportunity and the luxury to get to rethink how to do things versus having to play the tired playbook because there was no other option. And so whoever leans into that is going to win, big time. And I think it's going to take creativity and, for all the people that are the VP of marketing now, 10 plus years experience in all the old ways, like you really need to put on your thinking cap and figure it out. If you keep doing the same methods over and over again that worked in the last 10 years, they're just going to degrade over time on you.
Yeah.
And you're going to keep wondering, why is the business not doing well? Why is conversion rates going down? Well, I think you know why.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've been in that VP of marketing, head of marketing role, and my challenge there was you got to keep the lights on too, right? Like you can't just abandon all the stuff that's working now for the stuff that might work in 5 years. So like organizationally and structurally, and I know you've been head of revenue as well, and you've lived those days. Like what's the right way to approach that? Is it a couple hires that are thinking out a few years? Is it you're carving off half your time to do it? Like what would be some
Yeah.
suggestions you have?
Well, I think we all know that the speed of innovation and change continues to accelerate. So that's like just a fact, right? And I think you just own that and say, well, look, opportunities that are really outsized, like opportunities, are going to have increasingly ephemeral like windows. And we just need to harness it when we can harness it. And we need to architect ourselves around being prepared to take advantage of these moments, right? Rather than optimizing long term for one channel, right? I think that's the like, take AdWords for example on Google. It's like, Google's actually done a pretty good job of making it set and forget it for yourself, right? And I think increasingly that isn't as much of a lever as people would like it to be. And like what it is a lever is like attention is grabbed on social media now with very specific things that happen, whether it's a new topic, whether it's a scandal, whether it's a meme,
Mhm.
whatever it is. And I think being able and flexible and agile enough to take advantage of those things so that you can be in the mix is really important. And I think that's hard to re-architect around.
Got it.
Because it also means people need to be athletic in terms of like their skill sets. They have to be real doers and thinkers and be able to execute on something and can't just be specialists.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Here's a common setup I see in this marketing mix and fintech lending specifically. I'm making up these numbers to some degree, but I do think they're illustrative. 60% of my traffic comes from affiliates, the nerd wallets, the karmas, the experience. It's a list of maybe 10 affiliates that drive the bulk of that. And then there's a long tail that um, each one is small, but 60% affiliate, let's say 30% direct mail. I'm just sending letters to people based on credit bureau reports, that sort of thing. And 10% maybe search or meta. That's a very common distribution composition and very little to no brand recognition on the product. Like no one's going out of their way to search for the brand name because people don't know the brand name yet. It hasn't been out there long enough. They're not doing brand spend. If you were head of marketing within that setup today, what would be some bets you would start to place to start to either hedge for the future or just lean into stuff that you think might work in that context?
Yeah, I think inherently if you're outsourcing everything, right, you probably don't have the muscle internally to start doing these things. And so I think my first act would be what identifying what muscles that we need to build internally, because you may have gotten used to not having a marketing team of the composition that you actually need to go do these things. So that would be like my number one thing. Your org chart is your roadmap, right? And so I think if you've basically staffed against multiple people to do affiliate, relationships, that's what you're going to get, right? This is a hammer looking for nails. The so I think what you have to do is then say, okay, well, if we want to go somewhere else, the world's going somewhere else. Like, what roles do we need to staff against for that? And what does that look like? And so, and that doesn't have to be an internal hire. It could be an agency. It could be whatever it might be. But I would start re-architecting your org. And the org is what's going to take you to where you want to go rather than, telling your existing people, hey, you got to do this new channel. I actually think that's very hard to do and doesn't usually work very well. Not that people can't, adapt, but it just my experience, when someone's very familiar with something, a specific channel, it's hard to jump context unless they are actively asking to do it.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. So I think it's that rings true. Um, we have maybe 10 minutes left, Colin,
Yeah.
to chat. And I know you spend a lot of time as a angel investor in marketplaces specifically. And I'm curious what's caught your attention lately in the context of lending, maybe fintech.
Yeah.
I think our audience would be curious to see what you're seeing on kind of the frontier.
Yeah. I'd say like big picture, you know, part of my thesis in investing in marketplaces is that they're the core of economies essentially, like the transactions, like matching supply and demand. That is what economies are built on. So I'm always interested in investing in things that are one of the most durable and sustainable business models out there because that's how businesses transact and people transact. But I think what's increasingly true is that the cost of building software is going closer and closer to zero, and that means that the ways in which you can engage with the supplier demand sides of your businesses multiply exponentially. And whether that's providing them software to solve a problem, whether that's providing them content, like it can be anything. And that's what I call a marketplace plus model, marketplace plus something else, marketplace plus SaaS plus fintech plus insurtech. Like it's so easy now to provide people insurance or provide people financing and payment flows. Like those things are with the plus that actually create liquidity in the marketplace and stickiness. So that's a lot of what I look for. So I think for fintech and insurtech side of things, like figuring out how you play with others and in an embedded fashion can be a really interesting growth channel. It's hard. It's a partnership based thing. It's lumpy, but it can be very meaningful. In the insurance side, there's tons of businesses that have been built on this kind of embedded piece of it. The other thing I would say that I'm looking for, kind of in a more meta sense, is that AI is really breaking down the marketing silos, like we were talking about, and really making it increasingly hard to have something that's unique and defensible. And so I think when I think about marketplaces now, I'm thinking about who is aggregating unique supply or unique demand for that matter.
Hmm.
Who is doing a good job creating assets that only they own? And so that's what I'm thinking a lot about is like, and that's where I get probably a little bit of a question mark around some of these aggregator models is like, really what unique inventory do you have? That's why you're so open to some like an LLM disrupting you because they can aggregate things they can find on the internet. All those things are already available. So, I mean, Credit Karma is very much a marketplace plus model, right? We create a credit score and then we put a marketplace on top of it, right? Like it's a prime example of marketplace plus model. But that marketplace, has to be like that one doesn't have to be as defensible because people can get a free credit score through Credit Karma. Increasingly, I can get free credit scores everywhere, so that's eroding as well. Um, and then that credit card information, those like companies and those deals, like I can increasingly find those other places too. So, not to knock on them specifically, I just think generally those are all things that are going to start eroding at the edges that I get scared about investing in. And so I'm thinking harder and harder, like businesses like Airbnb, for example, like have a physical, unique assets that are hard to replicate. They're increasingly have returns. The value is going to continue to increase. Um, Now, in this space, I've looked at a lot of lending recently. There's like, I think AI has made underwriting actually quite a bit easier, right? Automate a lot of the sticky wicket type tasks of like paperwork and things like that. Um, Automating like different underwriting structures and things like that. So there's more and more of that. I think the issue there is again, it's relatively commoditized. Like it's not like, you know, it's just not that differentiated in terms of like the supply of like, the money.
Yep.
Um, on the demand side, I also think that lenders actually have decent access to all the people they want to underwrite. Like that's my thing is like because I've looked at this in a couple different businesses and like Outdoorsy when I was there, we looked at lending and kind of what I found was like banks actually and lenders generally like they actually have pretty good access to the people that are really underwritable, right? And they self-identify pretty easily. And so everyone's every lending market I see is like, oh, there's so much like demand and you can't find the supply for it. And I was like, well, yeah, because no one wants to underwrite those things, right? Because they're inherently risky. And so until the underwriting structure and risk structures change, I don't actually think we're going to see a lot of interesting innovation there. unless they can collateralize differently, like talking about Yendo, like, like that to me is where the unique asset is in how you collateralize things and how you can actually deploy the capital. And that's going to have to be innovation on the supply side that I just don't see happening yet.
If you want to support the show, the number one thing you can do is go to thefreetoaster.com and sign up for our newsletter. You're going to get a couple pieces per week of news, information, insights, and podcasts like the one you're listening to right now at the intersection of marketing, lending, and technology. That's our niche. We don't plan to go outside of that. It's the only publication I've seen out there on the internet that dials into this zone. So if you want to support us, sign up and share it in your favorite Slack channel.
I have a follow-up question for you. You mentioned embedded, and then you followed on with outdoorsy. Outdoorsy was what came to my mind.
Yeah.
But if I understand that business model right, outdoorsy is a marketplace where I can rent like what are they, like these like RVs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I've never rented one, so that's well outside of my wheelhouse. But I rent an RV, and embedded, I can basically insure that while I'm on my road trip. Is that the model?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like if I had the RV and I'm renting it out to you,
Yeah.
I would want to know that it's covered.
Oh, so as an owner, I want to be insured.
Well, both. I mean, like
both sides.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to be out the money of like I wrecked your vehicle, right, and be on
Yep.
the hook for the full value of that
Sure.
vehicle. And so, the liquidity in the marketplace is created by insurance, right? Both parties are more likely to transact when there's when they have insurance, and that's fintech in a lot of ways I view as like an enablement layer for commerce. And I think embedded insurance is really interesting. And it's like a big business, to be clear.
Yeah.
But I also think one of the things that we pioneered at Outdoorsy was taking that in-house. We ended up like doing balance sheet risk for a majority of it, and then I ended up building our own insurance company. And I think those things are actually going to get increasingly easier to do with AI. And so I think incumbents need to figure out how to be more tech first and like how to make it easier and easier for people to embed, or they risk the situation of people doing it themselves at scale, which is where the real economics are. Like we all know in finance and insurance, like there's no money in small amounts of volume, right? It's all in large amounts of volume. And so, how you get there is going to be the interesting part now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Carvana's model comes to mind when you describe that, where, I think they embedded lending into their business. I don't know if they had a partner or their own shop, but like it was tightly integrated into the checkout flow of like, hey, you want this car, you can finance it right here.
I mean, I think the best example where the embedder becomes, bought the marketplace is Rocket Mortgage buying Redfin.
That's pretty recent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like a major, the basically the supply side of the business buying the demand side of the business.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. One other thought I had, back to your queries in ChatGPT earlier. I'm gonna conjecture OpenAI is never gonna build the best shopping LLM for credit cards. There's a bunch of reasons why I think that. The primary reason is because a lot of the information you need to do that well is behind a firewall. It's in, there's an underwriting strategy that's behind closed doors. All the banks have them. They don't tend to want to release them. The winner there, I think, and it could be OpenAI if they really leaned into that use case, but the winner knows the market super well, has access to all the inventory, not just the top 10 brands, and actually has APIs directly to all of them. They can query, and they have the user file as well. Like they have the user's consent to ping the credit bureau and check against all the models. Only then can you really make a strong recommendation on a product, because remember, all the pricing and decision making is at an individual level. Do you agree with that? I mean, do you think there's going to be like a layer on top of like an OpenAI that wins there? Or?
I think it may be like maybe mischaracterizes how OpenAI probably thinks about themselves. And again, I'm not calling up Sam
Yeah.
here and know that what they're doing, but
Yep.
they don't have to do what you just said. They don't have to be the best agent for doing what you said, because they'll probably be the underlying LLM for that agent.
Right. Right.
And so the problem with that over time from everyone is that the more we keep training and using it for these specific use cases with agents, the more it just becomes better at doing it natively, And so, unless it gets a walled garden and it's like kept in a very specific box, I actually think it will become the best at everything over time.
The thesis being everyone's going to build on top of it for convenience day one, and
Yeah.
then they'll learn how
But-
to do it themselves and release it.
Well,
Got it.
I don't know. I don't think that you're thinking there's a person involved. I
Oh,
actually
no,
think
I get it.
I think the LLM just will you natively as a
Yeah.
consumer, like the
Yeah.
experience is getting better and better with OpenAI every day.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
any of the LLMs, right? They're just getting smarter and smarter and better. Why? Not just because of the training, but it's because they're getting more and more usage and data, which is a feedback loop of
Right.
improved quality. And so once it starts seeing something, like, yes, the banks may have these things behind closed doors, but it's not that it can't be inferred over lots of repetition, And so I think that's just something to be aware of with these models. Like, it's a recursive, like they just get more and more information and they get better and better at what they do. And again, the inputs matter, not taking that away, but I do think that's a really important piece of this is like, there's going to be increasing returns to like the LLM providers that can get the most users and usage and information put into it.
Yeah.
It's like a power law outcome here.
Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me a little of what people were saying in like the early, like maybe around 2010, 2012, something like that, where, that this is when the Credit Karmas and the Nerd Wallets were starting to pop off. They were doing like high growth. And, the cynics were like, oh, that's not a business. Google's going to eat that. Why would anyone search for a credit card on Credit Karma when they could go to Google? Google's going to eventually dominate that. And it ended up not being the case. Because there's enough niche specialty in that problem and the way you present it to customers that someone else ended up winning. It feels like you don't feel like you buy that argument in the context of OpenAI because of the recursive nature of
I think
how it learns.
maybe the nuance there is that I think Credit Karma works, or like not just let's not saying Credit Karma. They've won clearly if we're saying Credit Karma. Good job there, by the way. The thing is like I think people didn't know offhand when they search in Google all their information or the information they need to actually get a recommendation. And so I think to your point, like I think it's a very like personal information is very important in making the recommendation. So I think that was what was missed. Is people don't want to go to 10 different sites, enter in the same information just to hear a no, right? And so I think there's an aggregation piece of this where, again, going back to this Marketplace Plus model, where people actually went to Credit Karma for the free credit monitoring and entered in all the information that was required to get credit cards, not the other way around. They weren't searching first. They were like, hey, I want to get my credit score, which could be for a variety of different reasons. And so I think that's a really important point is like, come for the tool, stay for the marketplace kind of thing. That's in like, you can't underweight those types of things. I think what's a bit different though in this context is ChatGPT is the tool that people are coming for and putting in personal information. Like I'm probably just as guilty as everybody else of probably putting in probably way too much personal information into this chat and hoping it's benevolent. Yeah, so that's what I would say is like that's now people are going to stay with ChatGPT for something else. What's the next act? I don't know. That's kind of my 2 cents.
That's
So
a
I think
little
it'll play out
scary.
almost exactly as you say it's going to play out.
Yeah. It may so it sounds like you'd be a buyer of the stock right now.
Of ChatGPT or of
Or
OpenAI?
OpenAI, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a question of valuation, but it sounds like it could be
yeah.
a Google, like a Google in 2000 type of investment.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
Like I think we've, like there's generational companies only every generation. And I think people are like, well, this could be one of them. I think it already is one of them. So I think, to me, like, I will imagine that a large part of the market cap of all stocks is going to start, being related to the tech here. So, directionally, probably I would be a buyer of the stock, but also saying, like, I'm probably directionally just be in the S&P 500 or whatever, and NASDAQ, because the tailwinds are going to be felt for everyone, right? Yeah. Like, the one thing I'm certain of is I don't want to bet on which businesses are going to survive or not. Like, I think that's a hard bet to take.
Got it.
I would like to be in the business of tailwinds across many businesses that are going to stem from AI. So to me, it's a basket rather than a which one.
Cool. Interesting. So I think time to wrap here, Colin. I think
Yeah.
I'm imagining some of the folks that listen to this show, some of them are actually on the marketplace side. They build marketplaces
Oh,
for a
cool.
living, and they listen to the show to get insight onto how are lenders positioning themselves and like how are they approaching things. You advise marketplaces and you invest in them. So how tell us more about that, and how can folks get in touch with you if they think there could
Yeah.
be a partnership?
I think easiest way, you can email me at colin@yonder.vc. Happy to chat. I try to be like really open with my time with people and just to get to know everyone in the space. If you want to read what I write, gardinercolin.com is my newsletter on all things marketplaces. And then otherwise, I post a lot on LinkedIn with you, Carlos, and so people can find me there. But I think those are the best spots.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking an hour and a half out of your day to chat with me. I learned a lot. I found this very educational, and I have some homework to do on the other side of this to get caught up on some of the things you mentioned. But hope to have you on the show sometime soon again, Colin.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Maybe we should put a reminder to follow up with this at like a few years.
6 months, a year.
see how accurate I was. I feel like a little bit like a Nostradamus, but things are changing fast, so I'm just trying to like stay abreast of it, and I don't know, like have good insight about what's coming down the pipe.
No, I love it. You've given us a lot to think about. So we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.